In East Africa, very near to the famous Olduvai Gorge, and just before reaching the Serengeti, one encounters an amazing phenomenon known as the shifting sands. It is an enormous pile of sand, a huge sand dune, really, perfectly shaped in the form of a crescent and much taller than a human being. The amazing thing about it is that it keeps moving forward. In an eerie fashion, it creeps along, unstoppable in its path. I am told that every year it progresses about 25 meters, all the time maintaining its perfect shape, but moving forward across the landscape. How can this be? I suppose you're probably not permitted to walk on top of it, but there was no one around, so I climbed to the top of the shifting sand dune. The sand was very fine and pleasurable to the touch. I noticed that the footprints I left in the sand were within a few moments completely covered over, with no trace left, so that each time my footsteps destroyed the perfect shape, within seconds the perfect shape was restored. How could this be? Then I noticed that my sandals, which I have left behind on top of the sand dune, were moving without me in them, moving across the top of the dune until they reached the bottom. How could this be? It seemed like a perfectly smooth surface, but when I looked closely, I saw that every grain of sand was in motion, spinning around like a whirlwind, propelled by the gentle yet constant wind, driving the entire dune toward advancement, one little grain of sand at a time. In awe, I observed and pondered the mystery. From where I was standing, all those millions of grains of sand looked alike. But when I got down on my knees and looked more closely, I could tell they were all different. There were big ones and small ones, black ones and white ones, and every shade and size between. They were of every shape imaginable, but all were being propelled by the same wind. Some things can be known and seen and understood only when one drops to one's knees. Those grains were being propelled by something outside themselves. Each allowed itself to be driven so that the whole mound was able to advance. I reflected and asked myself what would happen if those grains of sand were people, and one of them were selfishly to refuse to relinquish its control, refuse to allow itself to be moved by this powerful wind. What would happen to that shifting sand dune? The progression of the whole would be thwarted. The perfect shape would turn to chaos. Jesus tells of another pile of grains. Not grains of sand this time, but grains of produce, piling up into an enormous mound, too large for the barns or the needs of one person. Now that landowner could have decided to share that excess food with those in need. He could have chosen to allow the mound to move and grow and do some good. Instead, he chose to store it all up for himself at any cost, and the dune and the man remained unmoved. The Spirit of God was trying to move him to an act of love, but he refused to allow himself to be driven by that Spirit. So the mound remained a mound, neither shifting nor advancing, neither growing nor helping others to grow. When we are blessed with an abundance, it is always, always, always a clear call from God to give. Had this man responded to this call, Each of those grains given away would have taken on eternal value for the man, just as everything does when we give it away. As it was, he hoarded and lost everything. When we allow the Spirit to breathe in us, we help the entire world to keep its perfect shape, and we ourselves advance in powerful ways. The secret, the power, is in giving. St. Francis of Assisi came from an extremely wealthy family, yet he was inspired to give himself totally. In one radical, life-changing moment, he gave away everything, down to the fine clothing he was wearing, and stood naked before the world, allowing the Spirit to move him unencumbered. Mahatma Gandhi was once boarding a train when one of his shoes fell off. He could not retrieve it because the train was already moving. Immediately, he took off his other shoe and threw it out the window, so that it landed very close to its mate. Those around him thought he was crazy, but Gandhi replied that the poor guy who finds the shoe would now have a complete pair that he could actually use. Gandhi didn't give halfway. He gave totally, and he allowed himself to be moved by that mysterious Spirit breathing through him, that powerful wind propelling him through life. In the same way, when I saw those sandals of mine moving, propelled by some mysterious force, I suddenly realized that had they remained on me, they would not have moved. Nor would the grain in the barn ever move and nourish as long as it remained in the barn. Only when we cease clinging to something can it be moved to do marvelous things. The martyred Archbishop of San Salvador, Oscar Romero, used to say, "We can't do everything, and there is a certain liberation in the realization of that. But that realization enables us to do something, and to do it very well." When we look at the world and see the obscene poverty, the starving children, the peoples at war, we feel so helpless. We feel like a tiny grain of sand, incapable of doing anything. Yet there is tremendous power in letting go and surrendering to the power of God. In the hands of God, that tiny grain of sand can be moved and transformed. In the hands of God, that grain of sand can become a grain of wheat for the nourishment of the world. Can we change the world around us? Yes. Can we make this planet a better place? Yes. Can we cause this shifting sand dune we call our world to move forward? Yes, yes, yes. The power lies in giving all we have. But we must, like those grains of sand, like St. Francis, like Oscar Romero, like Gandhi, surrender ourselves completely. We cannot cling to selfishness or fear or desire for power. We cannot cling even to our own life. We must not be afraid to give the other shoe. Then and only then can that life-giving Spirit of God blow through us and move us forward to something beyond our imagination. Then and only then will humanity be moved, one grain of sand, one grain of wheat, one grain of life at a time.